Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to speak on this very interesting topic. As Bobby just said, I was appointed just a little over a year ago and did not attend the training last year. Or I believe it was perhaps before my appointment was finalized. And so I haven't yet been through the formal training. I did have a chance to view some of the videotapes, Mary, and probably should have taken the assessment test, but this is a better experience to actually come here. So it is very interesting to be invited to serve on a panel as my first experience with this body. What I'd like to share with you are just some initial experiences that I've had as a regent, and I think it's a very appropriate title, What I Wish I Had Known before being appointed, or certainly before taking on the role. You heard a few snippets about my biography. I served 6 years as president of the ExxonMobil Foundation. I served on a number of community and education boards and organizations and not-for-profits over the years. I run a major pension fund, been CFO of a major international subsidiary of ExxonMobil. And so I thought that upon being appointed as a regent at the University of Houston, that not so much that I knew it all, but that I was really ready to go and that I knew enough to become functional on day one. And I won't say that I was totally wrong, but I was close. And there is so much more to becoming an effective regent at a state university, and a major state university here in the state of Texas. The first aspect that I would encourage all new regents and trustees to really understand are the laws and the regulations and statutes that govern our activities. And one I'll mention in particular, I know we'll talk about it, the Texas Open Meetings Act, which I was not particularly familiar with, and it's can lead to some interesting situations, such as being at a football game and three regents who serve on the same committee all head to the men's room at the same time. And I won't go any more than that, but those of you who know the need to avoid inadvertent quorums, which for me is very strange, because if you're sitting there talking to people and then you do something that comes natural and it turns out to be fraught with risk, is something that you really need to understand. Second, the language that the major stakeholders in our universities may speak can be quite different from what you're used to, given your background, whether it's in private business or in education or some other aspect of business. For me, my major background was financial. I spent 25 or so years working in the financial management activities at ExxonMobil. Coming over to the regent's position, it was a fairly easy jump to go from accrual accounting to fund accounting. I understood how the budgets were constructed. It wasn't that difficult for me to understand how state funding is applied to university budgets. But external communications with this broad group of stakeholders was just something that so far for me has been beyond the pale, and I'll share a couple of experiences with you. But in a year, I've had meetings, whether it's one-on-one, small groups, or even large sessions where I've been asked to speak to students, parents, faculty, administration, taxpayers, politicians, community representatives, athletic fanatics. Notice I didn't say fans, fanatics, and also business owners and service providers. And this is not necessarily an exhaustive list, but this has been a start for me in 1 year. So, let me just talk about a couple of experiences which I thought would be interesting to you. And many of you may be familiar with some of these. 3 weeks ago, some of our athletic fanatics at the University of Houston, and they seem to select you or pick you out as the newest regent, because for some reason many believe that the newest regent or regents are the ones who actually run the university. They've got it kind of backwards, but they also think you may be a little bit naive, and they're able to perhaps influence your views much more easily than those who have more experience on the board. But anyway, 3 weeks ago, a group of our fanatics were talking about our football team and football coach, and clamoring, McElvey, make sure you don't lose that coach. You got to keep our coach, give him a raise. It doesn't matter how much money it takes. You've got it, give it to him. Then we lost the football game, and the same group of fanatics said, were saying, who hired him? Did you do this? You're responsible. And so you can go from people who are at the highest of highs on a situation to literally the lowest of lows, and what you have to really be able to do is to learn how to listen with discernment and be careful not to convey that you're making any decisions or communicating anything about those situations, which are quite private, they're quite sensitive, they're quite important to the overall welfare of the university, and it's extremely important for any individual regent to go beyond the agreed communications plan that your board may have, and that's the important thing. We have an agreement at the University of Houston that our chairman is the public face of the university, and so in these areas, in this particular situation, what did I learn? I learned don't talk football with athletic fanatics. Another example, as a major employer and procurer of goods and services, your institution is very likely an important economic engine in your local community. I know that the University of Houston is. As a regent, you're going to be the focal point for people who wish to do business with the university. In lay language, again, some stakeholders will see you as maybe an entree point or conduit to areas of business of the university that they had previously not been able to accomplish or to enter. What have I learned? Again, there's a process, and we have a process for people who'd like to do business with the university. Whatever the process is at your institution, it's important that you follow the process. It's extremely important that you avoid any conflicts of interest. It's extremely important that you avoid even the appearance of conflicts of interest. And I think the appearance of conflicts of interest is just as important as an actual conflict. An actual conflict, people will be able to see that because there will be some documents. But it's the appearance of conflicts that can do great damage, not only to your personal reputation, but to the reputation of the institution itself. So it's very important that you do that. Let's get back to stakeholders again, and I talked about how people communicate, and I'm going to kind of begin to wrap up here. The stakeholders represent many different interests. There are just, this is one thing I wish I had known. Just I was aware of these groups. I've served on many advisory boards, and I've been a parent of students at a large state university. So I've been a parent. I've known people who do business. I mean, I've kind of known, but I had really no idea just how this operates on almost a daily basis. And so here's an example of the language that you'll have to learn, the languages that you'll have to learn. I was invited to a meeting with several community and state political leaders. Not a large meeting. There were about 12 people in attendance. And a particular topic came up that gave rise to some very passionate, even heated discussion. And at one point, the moderator concluded that we were in disagreement. I was in disagreement with the other parties because, and this is an exact quote, Gerald, you are talking in a factual context, and your opponent is talking in the political context. Now, what do you think I'm supposed to do with a statement like that? Basically, it's time to end the discussion because you're not going to reach agreement, and politics and the political views of people are something that they're going to hold and share. There are appropriate forums for that to be discussed. Ensure that you're in the proper forum and that you have agreement among your board for positions that you might take on issues affecting the institution. Make sure you have agreement, and if you don't have agreement, then it's probably not a topic that you should be discussing publicly. So finally, my last comment on what I wish I'd known is frankly the role of a regent. And certainly the training will help, and I read all the materials, but but you have to live it, breathe it, and experience it, and then talk with people who are very experienced in this area. But also, Marriott, I would say that the other side of this is that not many people in the broader community fully understand the role of the region. I guess I mentioned that they see New Regents as someone to get to try to influence, to try to move the institution in a certain direction, which is not true. They see New Regents, or they see any individual regent or even groups of regents as someone to approach, again, to move an institution, and they don't fully understand that the role of the regent fundamentally is governance, it's policy, it's setting strategy, it's setting goals and objectives, it's evaluating the performance of the people you hire to manage the university. And that's an important point for me to learn in 1 year, and I think it's probably one of the most important aspects that I've learned that I think will lead to effectiveness in my role as a regent at the University of Houston. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I was fully prepared to be the last one because my last name starts with a Z. And I'm accustomed to this, even graduation time, you know, the last guy sitting there. I want to wish you a good morning and thank you for being here. I have, well, I'll put it very bluntly. I was lied to when they asked me to be appointed to the board. They told me that we would have one meeting a month. This is my 5th meeting, and the month is not over yet. But you do come into this position in a kind of a unaware state in terms of what community colleges do. I mean, I was in public ed for 36 years. Loved that part of education, thought that was it. And that one of these days I might retire and be an adjunct at the community college system, in the community college system there in San Antonio. Well, I was totally uninformed. I had no idea what community colleges do. So, as this thing says, I wished I'd known what a wonderful experience I was going to have. I'm on a 13-year journey, and I can tell you it's been an incredible learning experience for me. Not only in terms of understanding governance, Bobby, but in terms of me growing as a person, as a citizen. And so, you know, you start out, for example, I started out in a very negative way, in that I followed a trustee who had just been sent to prison for 7 years for not governing well. Our board was in shambles. 4, in fact, had been indicted, and they went to, they had all kinds of problems with the legal system. So when this new board came in, I was one of the last ones that came in. And we started looking at the process, and I didn't expect that. I thought that we'd just come in and sit down and say yes or no and then go home. Well, we started looking at the responsibility, how broad that responsibility is, and how it impacts your community. It's not just making a decision for the college, but it impacts the whole community, because community colleges are pervasive in terms of their service to the community. And so we started looking at policies. We figured out that the policies had not been reviewed for years, and they were outdated. So that part of it we had to look at. We looked at budget. I wish I'd known more about budget. I mean, I was used to dealing with a little bitty budget at my school when I was a principal, but when you start dealing with a budget that exceeds $300 million, you start feeling the weight of that responsibility. You can't just take it lightly. That number will make you sit up and take notice. And so we found out that our accounting processes were terrible, that we were not accountable to taxpayers, and so we started fixing that. And then we found out that we have a 5-college system in San Antonio, that each one of those colleges were acting unilaterally. They weren't working as a team, as a district. And so we had 5 or 6 different IT systems, which costs a lot of money, and it's a very unproductive way to approach things. We found out that a student would have to disenroll from one of our colleges to go to one of our sister schools. Totally bad. We didn't have a common transcript. We didn't have a common schedule of courses. Even the outcomes that had not been worked out between these colleges. Well, 13 years later, we've taken care of all of that. But I did not know that would be the motivation for me to get more and more involved with the colleges, to the point that whenever I'm mowing the yard, I'm not thinking about the Dallas Cowboys. I'm thinking about community colleges. And I don't have a life, Bobby, I think sometimes. But again, you start looking at what really did it for me, I think, in terms of governance and going through all that experience, was sitting on stage at graduation, and you see 16-year-olds that have been in early college high schools graduating. You see 72-year-olds who decided that, you know, I've raised great-grandchildren, great-grandchildren, now it's time for me to do something. And you see veterans that are coming through, they wear special cords when they graduate. And you see so many veterans coming across our stages. And I started thinking, what if we weren't there? What if community colleges were not there? And so going back to the initial concept here that we're presenting on, student success has become a big issue for me, and it should be for most trustees that are coming in new to the service. One of the things that we were doing early on was we were invested in failure. If you look at our metrics, we were terrible. Our graduation rates were terrible. Completion rates were just terrible. And so we've worked hard at not investing in failure, taking away those barriers, making sure that students have every opportunity to succeed, because we cannot afford to have our citizens not have credentials, not have the training to add to this beautiful state and this wonderful country that we live in. So, but the 60 by 30 plan, Bobby, I think it's it's a great goal, it's a good direction. And I will tell you this without any uncertainty, that without the community colleges, this plan will not succeed. And I'm saying that with a lot of confidence because we were sitting with Chairman Zerwas the other day, and he basically said, you know, this is a mirror unless community colleges are supported and that they're involved in that process. So again, to sum up, your training is not over today. My training is ongoing, and the reason it is because I belong to the Texas Association of Community College Trustees. I belong to the National Association, which provides a lot of great training, and you have a lot of exposure to best practices around the nation, around the state, and you learn so much from being involved with people like Danny Gertzen over there and Graciela. We share ideas, and we become better in terms of governance. And so where am I going now with my career as a trustee? First of all, I need to be data informed. We moved away from all of the emotion like, well, that president's not doing the right thing. But why isn't he? Where's the data? Where's the data that says that? And I think 60 by 30 is going to require that to look at our metrics. And so data informed. Don't make decisions that are emotional. Make them on data and what the presidents bring to you in terms of here's our capacity, and here's what our students are doing, and let's do this in a business-like way instead of in an emotional way. And that's where the politics comes in. The other thing is the results are slow. Given the 13-year journey, it's been a while before you start seeing the results. So I'm just going to give you one last example of that. When I got on the board, we were graduating about 3,200 students. That was back in 2003. Slowly but surely, investing in success instead of failure, we move forward. In 2014, we graduated 6,800. Yay, it was a record year. The next year, 2015, we graduated 9,800. Awesome. I mean, I was just blown away. We set a goal for 2016 of 10,500 graduates. We just got the figures for that year. It's 12,003. Now, you take that journey and that completion rate, something happened that was positive, something happened that the synergy that the board, because we worked together and supported the chancellor, got us to that point. And so I think I'm kind of worried, though. That's a pretty good achievement. Out of 88,000 students to have above 12,000 graduates. I hope we don't just top off right there, because 60 by 30 requires us to have over 13,000 graduates. We're almost there. But still, if you stay data informed, if you review everything you have, and you become a different kind of trustee rather than be the political guy that's sitting there, you know, just asking questions and causing disruptions. But if you become data informed, there's some really incredible positive things that can happen in your district. And I can see that all around this room. I see Gigi just came in, and she's from ACC. They're doing incredible work. They're doing incredible work at South Texas. I mean, and so there's a lot of, in my mind, there's a lot of enthusiasm that you can bring to this position, but you also have to bring that data set and rely on that data set to be successful. And again, I wish you the best as a trustee, and if you need anything, if you have a question about anything, I am always available to help you. And stay away from Mary Smith, because she will make you work at these functions, and you cannot say no to her.
That's the best advice.
That is really good. Good morning, everybody. Howdy. I've been doing this for about 3 years now, and when the co-board first asked me to do this, I thought, golly, what a thankless job. But then, after the first time I did this, I had a number of CEOs come up to me and say, thank you so much for telling my new trustee exactly what I want him to know. And so my portion is, from a CEO's perspective, here's the stuff your CEO wants to say to you, but it would be career limiting if they were to say it directly to you. So I'm the Aggie who is just silly enough to keep coming up here every year and telling you these things. So there's some great resources among all of your stuff. Take advantage of those if you're new trustees or even if you're seasoned. But here's what your CEO really, really needs you to do. The big three. The first is protect the institution. And you've heard some about that. Things like conflicts of interest, making sure you speak in a single voice to the public, support the audit function and make sure that your quality control is really good, watch out for reputation risk as opposed, and in addition to fiscal risk. Those are things that you should quite normally be really, really concerned with and focus a lot of attention on that. Number two is manage yourself. The board must manage itself. And here's why. This is what your CEO wants you to know. Every minute that the CEO spends managing you and the respective members is a minute that that CEO can't spend doing her or his job as the leader of your college. And so if you are lucky enough to become chair, you take on a new responsibility, and that is your job is to manage, and this is the only time you manage the board so that the CEO can manage the college. So that's number two that your CEO would ask of you. Number three is, of course, this is probably your most important duty, is select and most importantly, support the CEO. The notion of board CEO structure is a time-honored one. It's been with us for hundreds of years, and it's stuck around because it really, really works. But it works best when everybody understands their various roles. And so the roles are this: the board governs and the administration manages. So what's a good way to do that? I will tell you the best board members I've ever seen are always those who ask as opposed to tell. There is nothing that will guide an organization better, that will lead with the right kind of governing hand, than a well-conceived question. Usually it starts with, tell me about, or how do we, or something like that. And in fact, if you'll listen to yourself and to your board members when you ask those questions, you'll find out whether you're committing the greatest sin that a board member can do, and that is micromanage. Listen to the questions, and in your packages is a matrix that we've refined over time, and a lot of these are actual questions that my fellow CEOs have provided to me, and I'll give you some examples of it. The first, these will be paired questions. The first question is an example of micromanagement. The second question is a similar topic done from the perspective of governance, and here's some examples. This is an actual question asked in a board meeting. How many gallons of gasoline do our police department burn? Now, that may seem like a fairly innocuous question, but here's what happens when you micromanage. When you drive the CEO down into issues like that, you are making sure that the CEO isn't focusing on the things that only the CEO can do. You're asking the CEO to delegate it, herself or himself into an area that is a lower order of function than a CEO should be done. Here's a better sort of question. Tell me about our energy management plan. Tell me about our aspirations to be green. What would be the benefits of a comprehensive energy plan, and is it worth the sort of effort to go through? The first is a micromanagement question. The second ones are governance. Here's some others, for example. How many sections of cosmetology did we teach last semester? You'll notice the administrators in the back are laughing because they've heard these questions. Look around the room, and the people who are smiling are the administrators who have been through this. Here would be some good alternatives. Are we meeting the significant workforce needs of our service area or of the state? And how do we know that? You could also ask, which industry sectors hire our graduates and which offer the highest level of student success? How do we know that our programs are appropriately targeting the workforce needs of Texas? Those would be policy sorts of questions that are really the most appropriate thing a board can discuss with their CEO. Here's another one that is really, really common. How many millions did we receive in grants this year? A lot of schools get pulled all out of distortion or distorted into a distorted array because grant numbers are often focused on. When the true question should be, how do we employ capital in a way that helps us achieve our stated mission? How much of that capital is externally sourced, how much comes out of tuition, and how much comes from the state, and is that mix the right mix for us? So that's an example of a micromanaging question versus a policy. If you look in your package, you'll see there's far more of those. And what I would suggest is, if you're brand new, or even if you're seasoned, ask yourself, am I micromanaging? Because it is the one thing that can truly spoil the governing CEO structure that is appropriate for all institutions. Finally, I'll offer you this advice. As you go into a board meeting, it's not a bad idea to be like a head football coach and ask yourself, what are we trying to accomplish in this game and how's our game plan? And I think there's 3 standing questions that are really important that your CEO wishes you would ask yourself before you go into every single meeting. The first is, are we asking our CEO to spend their time on the things that only the CEO can do? Now remember, you have one employee that you supervise, and that's the CEO. And you probably pay her or him a lot of money, and if you don't, you should. Because I know all 50 community college and many of the university CEOs, and they're highly professional folks. If you don't have confidence in them, find a way to get it. And if you don't have confidence with them after that, then get a better CEO. And then let your CEO be a leader for the college. The college doesn't need 10 CEOs, it needs 1. And you then lead the CEO. If you ask your CEO to go do things that others could do, you are wasting your investment in their salary. So that's tip number 1 as you head into every board meeting. Tip number 2, never forget what you're there for is student success. And it is so easy to get lost in many of the other details, particularly if you're micromanaging, and lose track of the fact that the reason you're there, the drain the swamp question is, we're here for student success. And so make sure every meeting is aimed at that. And does that particular single focus is not lost. And then finally, this is really important because boards tend to creep. And they creep toward bigger and seldom smaller. Ask yourself before every meeting, are there things in this agenda that we should stop doing in addition to start doing? Are there things we should delegate to the college administration that we have ourselves fully engaged in? If you don't challenge yourself with every single agenda on that matter, it is inevitable that you will swell to the point where you have encroached on the administrative function. And again, then you'll end up with 10 or 13 or 9 CEOs as opposed to 1. Here's a final danger sign. If you as a regent or a trustee find that you are interacting on a regular basis with various levels of administration, particularly beyond the top 2 or 3, then chances are you're micromanaging. Because the truth of the matter is, the governing board CEO model is based on the fact that you focus on the CEO who focuses on the company, or in this case, the college. And if for some reason you've lost confidence that that's getting done correctly, well then fix that. But don't take the place of the CEO by reaching beyond them to do things. Hire a great CEO, and CPAs make great CEOs, by the way. Right, Judette? Yeah. So, and Pam. So, hire a great CEO and then hold them accountable to do the job for you. So that's what your CEO wishes they could say to you, and I'm seeing some CEOs right now nod their head, go like this, and usually after this session they say thank you. Don't forget the one that's really, really important. Manage yourself. Don't ask your CEO to be the board referee. Then you will free her or him to do their real job, which is to run the college. And with that, I turn it back to you, Bobby.
Gerald, Mike, Roberto, like I said, I've done this about 5 times, and once again, I think each time it gets better. And thank you all for sharing your insights, your experience, your advice. I think it's very, very timely, and I hope everyone derives something from that. So I really, really appreciate it. Let's give all of them a big round of applause.